Hello and welcome to another episode of The Wannabe Entrepreneur, the podcast about what's really like to bootstrap a company. And today I have another interview for the listeners, for the Wannabe Entrepreneurs. I have with me Olu. Hey Olu, thank you so much for joining.
Hey, how you doing, Tiago? Thanks so much for having me.
No, it's my pleasure. It's really nice to always meet other bootstrappers and to learn about their stories. And today we are going to learn about Prelo, the startup, the project that Olu is the main founder of, and is also he kind of made the move from a full-time job to being a bootstrapper. And I'm sure there's a lot of cool stories to tell there, and I'm excited to learn more. So yeah, thank you so much. And yeah, let's get started. I would start by asking you, Olu, to do a little quick introduction about yourself in your own words. Who is Olu?
I you know, basically started this journey last year, Prelo, and it's been an amazing journey so far. I have a wife and a daughter. I've been in technology perhaps for about 2 decades or so, and it's been an amazing journey. Started life in investment banking.
Okay.
Did that for quite some time and then moved on into the startup space. So great to be here, and thanks for having me, Tiago.
So I guess you started investment banking, very different kind of job, very stressful, I would say. Was that the reason why you moved towards bootstrapping entrepreneur in following this entrepreneur path?
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, investment banking typically is stressful, right? So I started in investment banking in the sort of mid to late 90s. I started actually as a C++ programmer, and
Okay.
we were building, sort of risk strategies in the commodities and derivatives, space, really.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, no, I mean, typically banking is quite stressful anyway, really sort of demanding long hours, and just you're always challenging yourself. And one of the reasons why I moved after having been in banking for probably about 20 years was really because I just wanted something different. I wanted a change of scenery, and I wanted to take the opportunity to learn different skills and mix with different types of people. Because
Hmm.
when you've worked in investment banking for so long, you can be in a situation where you tend to meet the same type of people.
Right.
Um,
How
so
are
yeah,
these
so
people? Like, what is there a typical personality of people that work in this area, investment banking?
Yes, to a certain degree, right? I mean, a lot of very high achievers. Um, from great universities with degrees in mathematics and computer science and so on. Um, and
Right.
everybody, interestingly, wants to work in the front office. Everybody wants to be a trader. Everybody wants to work in the where the action is happening.
Right.
Without you know stereotyping, it's back then anyway. Throughout my journey, it was an extremely competitive environment,
Mhm.
and yeah.
So, what is really investment banking? Because I've heard this term a lot, but I would, since you worked in it for 20 years, like you're the best person to explain it, I guess. What is investment banking?
Yeah, interesting. I mean, from my perspective, typically you have retail banking, right? And that's essentially a facility, a structure that basically allows people and businesses to put their money in a particular type of bank or and so on. With
Hmm.
investment banking, it is slightly different. It's an opportunity for your clients and your counterparties to put money in your in various assets
Right.
that your specific bank ideally trades in, and it really gives you an opportunity then to as a bank to invest that money on behalf of your of your clients.
But are those the normal banks where you normally create your accounts and then you can put your money and get some interest, or is it like a
No,
specific bank?
no, slightly different. Yeah, I mean those are retail banks typically.
Right.
But yeah, I mean those are typically retail banks where you put your money in and you hope that you get an interest because they invest it in significantly low risk
Hmm.
um, sort of low risk investments. Whereas in investment banking, it's slightly higher risk, right?
Right.
Um, I work specifically in commodities derivatives, and within that space, we were building sort of what you'd say was risk strategies for sort of derivatives trades or derivatives
Right.
traders. Which I'll give an example. Say if you had somebody in Brazil who was a cocoa farmer and cocoa took 2 3 years whatever to harvest. We would build solutions which essentially identified all of the possible reasons that could affect the size of the harvest. And some of those
Hmm.
things could be anything from weather to change in regime to anything, and being
Wow.
able to get all of that information
And you
and
build
be a,
algorithms to predict this.
Yes. So, part of that would be harvesting data, weather data, would be harvesting historical data, and be using that to determine whether or not there is going to be, what is going to be the effect of, let's say, a typhoon or something.
Wow.
In the event that happens between that, the period before
Right.
the cocoa harvest, for example. But yeah, so that from that space, it was interesting. Spent some time doing that. I wanted to be a derivatives trader, so I went and took some exams in derivatives trading. But as
Hmm.
life would have it, I didn't actually get an opportunity to got qualified, but never actually got the opportunity to participate and actually be and actually trade derivatives. Um,
Hmm.
but what I then moved on to was managing big projects, managing big teams, and delivering sort of big programs of work, which was equally as exciting because it still allowed you to engage with the bankers and the business,
Right.
and you kind of felt that you were delivering value, right? You still felt that you were adding value, maybe not
Hmm.
as a trader, but as somebody that's delivering technology, for example, to help the various trading desks perform well.
Right. I mean, I find it fascinating. I'm still thinking about what you're saying about creating models that would even take in account the change of a regime.
Yeah.
Like, how is it even possible? Like, how accurate were these models actually? Were they good?
Well, I mean, some of the banks I worked with, I mean, I worked for about 10 different banks in the space of those years.
Wow. Okay.
And they've been, they were, obviously successful through that period. You can imagine that commodities and derivatives, especially, was a really, successful, area of investment
Right.
banking for a very
Right.
long time before we had the crash, sort of mid 2007 or so.
Hmm.
But yeah, so
How
you
was
know,
that actually? As an investor banker and work in that area, how did you leave that crash?
it was interesting because it actually broke when I was in holiday in Mexico with my wife and my daughter.
Okay.
So we were watching on TV and wondering whether or not, because we both work for investment banks,
Okay.
we were watching on TV and thinking whether or not we were going to have a job when we got back.
Wow.
Um, so that was interesting. So we just thought, oh well, let's just have a great holiday and think about it. think think about it when we get back, right?
That
Um,
crash was caused because of the real estate bubble. No, was that the reason?
yes, yes, yeah, exactly.
Were you
Um,
predicting this already? Was it like clear that this would happen, or not so much?
It wasn't. It wasn't. It wasn't. I think the people on the ground knew. If you've ever watched the film The Big Short,
Yeah,
it's a
yeah, I watch it. It's
really,
really
really
good.
good film.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, really good film. The people, the people on the ground knew what was going on to a certain extent.
right,
Um, but it was just one of those things where you think, well, the banking establishment is just too big to fail, right? There's going to
right.
have to be some sort of help or something from the government if anything ever happened. But yeah, no, we were in Mexico when it all broke, and we flew back to London, flew back to the UK, and I ended up. It was probably one of the more stressful periods actually because we worked, 7 or 8 weekends in a row.
So I think it's safe to say that you gained a lot of experience in the business side, right? You knew how to manage companies, what would influence a business, right? What are the factors that you should pay attention to? You certainly have much more knowledge in the business world than I do. Did that help now when you started doing this shift towards bootstrapping, towards building your own company?
Interestingly, it did and it didn't.
Okay.
The first company that I set up, or actually the second company I set up, failed miserably, um, and it slowly failed as well. Fair enough. I managed big teams. I managed budgets and
Hmm.
so on. The difference, though, is that you don't typically have commercial awareness when you work in these biggest institutions because you commercial awareness is left to the sales teams.
Right.
Commercial awareness is left to the sort of marketing teams. And the reason why that happens is because you tend not to be client facing most of the time.
Yes. Yeah.
So all you're doing really is delivering products to people that are already incentivized to use it. So it's not as if you can deliver a product and they can say, we're not using this because it's not suitable.
Yeah.
They will use it because it's been mandated by the organization that that's a product that they're going to use to perform trades, to book trades, to reconcile trades, and so on. So, in terms of knowledge of managing people and motivating people and managing budgets, yes, I had all of that experience, but in terms of marketing and advertising
Yeah.
and so on, I didn't have that. But I didn't know that I didn't have that until that
Yeah.
startup failed.
Nothing prepares you for marketing, for having to do marketing. The same happened to me. To be honest, I had no idea that most of my time would be spent actually doing marketing and trying to get customers and trying to transmit the message of what I'm building to the clients. So I totally understand. So you said that you built two companies before that end up not being as successful as you hoped. So tell me about this. Like, what went through your mind to do this shift? Tell me. I'm interested in knowing if you just like quit and started, or if you started on the side and then when you eventually thought, okay, let's do it full time, you did it. How was this process to go from investor banker to a bootstrapper?
Great question. So interestingly, the first startup, the very first one, was actually in the health space. Where I was doing that sort of part time. I was co-founder.
Okay.
Um, that's a long story, perhaps not one for a different, for a different
Yeah,
podcast. But
give us the short version.
but the founder disappeared to Dubai and took quite a bit of money with him,
Wow.
and he was not
Okay.
to be seen. So that was one,
What?
definitely one for one for a different conversation and for another podcast, I think. And I'm sure founders would learn from that a lot. Um,
But wait. I it's just one question here. So was it like your friend or something you knew?
yes, yeah, it was somebody that we actually worked together in banking,
Okay.
we'd worked together in banking, and we decided we were going to, he was building something. came to me and said, "Hey, I'd like you to be co-founder," and we said a gentleman's agreement on the handshake in 2015. We
Hmm.
started building, and it just it didn't quite didn't quite work out as we expected, and he disappeared to Dubai.
With your money.
Yes, yeah,
Wow.
yeah. It's
The,
just one of it's just one of those things. You you and this is a risk that I think a lot of founders don't actually appreciate.
True. Hmm.
You know,
He's
you
the first
jumping,
person I've
yeah.
heard I mean, I've heard, of course, disagreements and co-founders maybe stealing money, but never in the first person. Actually, someone telling me that story that happened to them.
Oh yes, and the thing is, when you work with somebody before for a few years, you kind of feel that you know them, but you don't
Right.
really know until you start to you're doing business with them, and it brings out different personalities. And I think that was something that was new to me. It certainly wasn't also new to me the fact that moving from corporate to startup, there are a lot of people that say that they're great at various jobs, but you
Hmm.
you pay them to realize they're not great. They're not good, in fact. And that's something that could never prepare somebody who's coming from a corporate space
Hmm.
into the startup world. You end up burning a lot of money kissing frogs, so to speak. I guess what I'm saying is when you come out into the startup world and you have some savings that you're going to use to push your startup forward,
Right.
assuming that marketing is one of the tasks that you have to overcome,
Hmm.
because you've come from a corporate space, you feel that you don't have the expertise to do the marketing. So you call on other people who claim to have the marketing expertise, and you
Right.
pay them to do this, and to perform this function for you, only to find out 2 months later that they're not or 3 months later actually, that they're
Right.
not really doing the job well, and they're
Hmm.
not really good at the job. But you still have to pay them, and you would have paid them for their time over
Yeah.
that period.
So you
and
still
and
feel a
that
little bit scammed somehow.
Oh yeah, massively scammed. I think now that I fully have, got to grips with marketing, at least from an inbound perspective, I know exactly what type of questions to ask. Anybody who claims that they are doing marketing or they understand
Yeah.
marketing,
Hmm.
if they can't answer those questions, then I wouldn't spend my time or my money with them.
Do you think that's important to first do it yourself and then hire, or it's okay to hire as long as you do a little bit more research, or even like ask someone that knows marketing to do an interview for you?
I think I think it's best to do it yourself. Just from
Okay.
my personal experience, I didn't do it myself, and I found so many. I spend a lot of money trying to find people, trying to find the right people, and always being disappointed. So definitely, I think it's right for you to do it yourself and at least understand what it is that you're recruiting for, because it's so nobody actually, as a bootstrapper, nobody can tell your story as well as you can,
Yeah.
and that is so important. You just hiring somebody and say, hey, come and help us do social media marketing,
Hmm.
that's just one very small aspect of it, right? And they'll come in and they'll post sort of cookie cutter posts, which isn't going to resonate with anybody. Whereas you post yourself,
Yeah.
people will engage with it. And that's just one part of it. And then you bring somebody else in who is a specialist in SEO to help you with inbound leads. You know,
Hmm.
it's another 3 months before you realize that they're not really that good, or they're not using the right keywords, or
Yeah. Yeah.
or the blogs that they're writing aren't necessarily well as optimized as they should be, right? That's another part. Or you bring
Yeah.
somebody else in to do outbound marketing and send outbound emails out, right? It would take a month, 2 months to realize that, okay, they keep coming back and telling you that the open rate of this email is 90%. Great. But the click through rate of any of the links is less than 1%,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
But if you don't know what metric to actually ask them specifically about, you're essentially, I wouldn't say you're getting scammed, but they're taking advantage of your lack of knowledge
Exactly.
to
Yeah.
present useless metrics to you
Mhm.
that makes you feel that you're going in the right direction, but in actual fact you're not.
And it's funny because in my job previously, I was a software developer, and society now goes more towards you being very good in a specific niche. You are part of a big machine, right? So I was coding and I was becoming good at coding and learning coding. But as you mentioned, that happened as well to you. I didn't know anything about marketing. I didn't know anything about selling, and I was even interested in that. So a lot of the people are not even interested, and they learn coding and they don't learn anything else. But then when you go to bootstrapping, you need to learn everything. It's interesting. It's like an intern. When an intern first gets to a company and kind of learns everything about the company, I think that's also very crucial, because then when this intern once become maybe a CEO, he or
Mm.
she knows every little bit and how to do the job. And I think that's really important. That's what I also really like about bootstrapping, because you really get to get your hands dirty and learn everything: sales, marketing, building the product, finance, everything. So I totally agree with you. One thing that it's hard is the mental part as well, at least for me. And in your case, I still have this question. So I don't know if you ever were able to get the money back, but how does this affect you mentally? How does this like did you, like, when your co-founder ran away with the money, did it take a while for you to get over it? Do you still think about it sometimes and get furious about it? Tell me about this.
Yeah, I mean, and the mental aspect, and just to mention what how you rounded off the last section in terms of having the ability to do everything. Absolutely, as a bootstrapper, you need to be able to do everything, and that's
Hmm.
again one of the reasons why I left the corporate space. I had experience in project program management, budget and finance. I had experience in coding and managing teams. I had a wide variety of experience in terms of you know building teams, mobilizing teams. I was mobilizing teams globally and being travel. I was traveling across many places to set up teams and get them going. So they were almost like mini companies, right? So yeah,
Right.
so broadly, you have to have expertise in this. I also have design skills, right? I can write, I can put designs together. I know a little bit about color and so on. So yeah, as a bootstrapper, you need to know absolutely everything. And it's a great way to save you money once you embrace the fact that nobody's going to come in to help you.
Right.
Moving on to the other question that you just mentioned, which is around mental. How do you manage the mental strain, the mental stresses? There are
Yeah.
two types of mental strains and mental stresses, right? Um, there's mental strains and stresses around just managing a startup by yourself and being
Hmm.
being the sole person that's responsible for its success or failure. And that is something that even if you have a co-founder, that's not something that can be shared. Almost, it doesn't matter how often you speak to the co-founder about this, unless they are 50-50 and they started with you right from the start and it's equally their dream. It's very very difficult to to be able to translate the feeling, the mental stresses that you go through
Yeah. Yeah.
to people, to anybody, even your partner. So for me, that's one part of it, and then the other part is, and that requires grit, tenacity, resilience, and just that never give up attitude. The other part of it is what you mentioned, which is around somebody disappearing with your investment, not and nowhere to be found. Now, for me. It was when it happened, I couldn't believe it actually happened. Um, and I tried to contact this person a few times. It just didn't work. But for me, yes, I was absolutely furious. I was I said, oh, this is I was so angry. There was no, I mean, probably one of the angriest I've been in a very, very long time. But over time, you get over it, right? Over time, you kind of accept that, hey, that's all part of the lesson, and you move on.
Yeah.
And I think also one of the things that's helped me manage some of these situations, especially stressful situations, is about compartmentalizing them. Right? If there's something that you can't actually do anything about, it's actually pointless
Yeah,
being
that's very important, I would say, but very hard to do. And because that's exactly it. I mean, you could, and a lot of people do, take it through the rest of their lives. They keep on thinking about it. They cannot be happy. They are afraid that this would happen again. But I think that's true. That's definitely the right attitude to think, okay, can I do something about it? If I can, let's do it. If I cannot, let's focus in what really matters, which is a business.
100%. Because the thing what you got to realize is every ounce your business requires every ounce of your energy, every ounce of your positive energy. So anything that's taking that energy away from you is not helping your business, and that's a really good way of managing any negativity.
Yeah.
It's really sort of putting it aside and realizing that any time spent focused on that negativity, especially if you have no way of addressing it, is not time. It's not doing your business any good. Even if it's your business or your, it could be anything. It could be your career. It could be, broken friendships. Any time that you spend too long processing and reprocessing and trying to
Yeah.
understand, it's just it's not a good way to spend your energy.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great lesson. That's definitely a great lesson. It's hard to put your pride aside sometimes, to be scammed by a friend, but
Mm,
in the end, that's what you have to do. That's how you will succeed as well, both
100%.
personally and also in business wise. So that
100%.
happened, you overcame it, and then I guess you built another one, which was still not Prelo, right?
Yes, exactly. So that was the second one, which was a job hiring platform. And interestingly, and when I speak to people about this, I say, well, yeah, I spent 20 years in investment banking. The typical natural progression would have been for me to have built a fintech product, right?
Yeah.
But because of what we did, because of what we did, and the fact that we were actually using AI and C++ libraries in that way, I felt that it was easy to move into the recruitment space and build a recruitment technology solution that essentially created a quantifiable value by matching a candidate to a particular vacancy. Um, Part of the reasons I did that was throughout my period in the banking space, I built and mobilized so many teams, and I actually am a specialist in building remote teams. That's kind of what I do. I build remote distributed teams, global remote distributed teams. So for me, and they're not just technical people. They can be business analysts, they could be
Right.
project managers, they could be, testers, they could be developers, DevOps, everything, so, and that's why I was mentioning before that, I can build mini startup companies because I have experience across majority, if not all, of the areas that you need within building a functioning team. So because I have all of that experience, and because of the challenges that I went through trying to build teams, I felt that the recruitment industry was failing me, was failing a lot of people who were trying to build teams. So I decided that I was going to build a platform that was going to optimize that process and essentially you just make it easier to find individuals that you wanted to work with in your team. Um, and we built that, and it was targeted initially at the corporate space because the corporate space was a space that I knew very well, especially in investment banking. That kicked my ass, right? And the problem with what happened there was that I wasn't cognizant or I wasn't aware of a number of things. One, I wasn't aware that the procurement cycle in the corporate space was so long. You know, if a company has just bought a recruitment solution, they're not going to be buying another one for for another 3 years, because
Right.
typically these contracts are long-term contracts. And also, corporates typically follow each other in terms of software that they purchase. So if a company had bought, I don't know, for example, Slack or Zoom, for example, most of the other companies that are similar would probably also buy Zoom, because
Huh,
they
interesting.
just follow each other. It's easier. It's
How
easier
do
for
they
them.
know about each other?
So the banking world is quite small, right? Even
Ah,
though there are so many banks, it is quite small, and people talk. And at any one time, I'd have friends in about 10 different banks, and
yeah,
we
I
meet up
understand.
for drink or meet up for coffee. So we know, and also we use that intel to determine the price that some of these B2B SaaS businesses were paying. But yeah, so back to the story. We weren't really appreciative of the procurement cycle. We weren't appreciative of the sort of herd mentality that a lot of these
Right.
institutions have, and therefore it was very difficult for us to get into, with our product, into the corporate space. And also, what was interesting was, and this is something that I tweet about quite a lot actually, is that the recruiters were obviously very, very much against the product. And a lot of the recruiters that we reached out to said, yeah, no, great product, but I'll never use it because, it's taken away the human element
Right.
of hiring. Well, actually, it was enhancing that process by
But what was the
automate.
product doing actually?
Yeah, so the product was matching candidates' resumes with job vacancies. So we will
Okay.
pull information from the resume, such as their years experience in a particular industry, years experience in a particular language, and so on. And there were also some tacit information that we picked up, and we matched that with we were using NLP,
Mhm.
and it was AI. It was an AI platform, right? So, and this was early in 2000, and we started in 2017.
Right.
So it was early then,
Yeah.
in terms of machine learning and so on. And we were we were matching candidates' CVs to job
Mhm.
opportunities, and we were providing a value, which essentially meant a probability that you should meet that person. And what we were doing, we weren't taking sort of education and any of that stuff into account, because we felt that created a number of biases. We actually didn't include education in that process.
Right.
But what we included specifically was the information in the CV about the person's experience, and the
Yeah.
information in the vacancy about the experience that they were looking for.
Right.
So and we could do like 600-700 matches in like 60 seconds, and it would provide a list of people that you should be speaking to based on the resumes that have been processed. Um,
Mhm. Which is something that is still used a lot nowadays, right? This kind of screening algorithms. I think probably Google also uses that because they get so many resumes that they need some way to automate and expedite this process.
100%, exactly. But in 2018, 2017, 2018, it probably was a little bit early for us introducing this into the corporate banking space,
Right.
ideally.
Even though probably Google was already using something like this, right? Like these big tech companies.
Exactly, but in the tech space. So
Mhm.
that was the problem. And a lot of people look at banks and think, oh wow, banks are making a lot of money and so on. Yes, but not necessarily implementing technology in HR
True.
or
Yeah.
implementing technology in that space.
Mhm.
Implementing technology and trying to optimize trading strategies and increase profits, absolutely, but not necessarily in human resources.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, anyway, we went through that process. It didn't work. We pivoted across to startups, and that was where Prelo really started to form. Even though we didn't know that at the time, we were basically using information and intelligence to identify startups that were, maybe interested in hiring, and that was how
Right.
we were trying to reach out to them. But the information that we had, we didn't. appreciate it enough until other companies and other founders were coming to us and saying, well, can you share this information in a spreadsheet? Because we would be interested in using this to identify key decision makers in startups that have just been recently funded so that we can approach them. And we were providing this information for free because our target audience were not startup founders looking to sell products. Our target audience were, startup founders that were looking to hire.
Right.
So the business model that we had, however, was a SaaS subscription based model. But the issue we had was that the volume of hires in the startup space just
It's not
wasn't
as
high
much.
enough for us to be
Yeah.
able to make any kind of money out of it, really. So yeah,
So
and
how much did you start selling anything? Did you get any company paying? Like
no,
I'm interested in knowing how did
not
you get
one.
not
Not
one?
not one. They tested it. They said it was great. They asked for features, which we made changes. But when we actually asked for payment, it
Right.
didn't happen. Um, and that was the challenge. And this is why I say that you need to be speaking to your customers at a very early stage. And this was a lesson actually that we took into building Prelo, because when we started with Prelo, we'd already had some validation by the fact that people were already asking us for some of this data. But moving on, when we actually started building the product, we had beta partners. We had people that we had already
Mhm.
identified as people that were going to be using or needed this product. So we could use them to properly validate the product as we were building it. And that was a big
Right.
difference.
And it's also important, although, right, to ask for money from the start, right? Because even in your first version of the product, like say, the companies they tried it out, they gave you feature suggestions, but then in the end they didn't pay, right? So is it also important to somehow ask for money or at least for a commitment? Like, would you pay for this kind of questions?
100%. But what we did actually, we went super proactive, super aggressive with this. We actually put a price on it, even at the MVP stage. So when we
Right.
released it in MVP, we put a price on it, which we didn't do with the hiring platform.
Hmm.
So if you wanted to use it, you had to pay. We also had a free version, but the free version, we made sure that it wasn't rich enough in features
Right.
for you to be able to do anything with it.
Hmm.
So we put a price on it, and that really was a massive thing for us
Hmm.
to in order to generate initial set of
Right.
revenue and customers.
So the idea of Prelo is to help solopreneurs to find potential clients. Is that it?
Correct, exactly. So Prelo is really, and this is helping solopreneurs and early stage founders identify clients in the startup space who
Right.
have funding. Because there's nothing worse than speaking to a startup that's not funded and you're trying to sell them a service that they can't pay for.
Right. So you have a huge database that you keep it up to date, and then you use the same technology that you developed for the hiring uh, an HR product you built. You use the same technology. You just shifted a little bit towards finding leads for solopreneurs.
We rewrote it pretty much, right? So the first hiring platform, was in Angular, and this one is in Vue.js and PHP Laravel.
Right.
We
But the
we
algorithm is the same, isn't it? Like to match
Some
the
of the
lead with what.
algorithm is the same,
Okay.
and most of it we've built slightly differently in order for
Okay.
us to. I mean, we literally built Prelo in 3 weeks or 4 weeks.
Wow.
We
Okay.
we leveraged the fact that we could use the data that we already had and just updated it, but
Hmm.
but we were very clear that we weren't going to get stuck into building really complex machine learning algorithms, because it didn't help us the first time. And it's very, very easy as technologists to disappear into this rabbit hole of
Yeah.
optimizing precisions
Yeah.
and so on, that you end up just not delivering a product that people wanted to use. So to answer your question, we used data that we previously had, we enhanced that data, and then we delivered a new product, new stack on top of that data.
How many people were you building the product, the MVP?
It was three of us, and it was crazy. And it was a lot of long hours. We literally just,
Mhm.
it was funny because it was in May, and we thought, okay, this is the end of the road. All my teammates, and we thought, right, we're going to shut down, and I'm going to perhaps take some time off and just lick my wounds, right? But then I thought over a weekend, and I thought, well, we've got all this data, and we've got people asking us for information. Why don't we just build a platform on top of this and try and see whether people are interested? So we just gave ourselves 3 weeks and said, right, we're going to build something. It's going to be crap. It's not going to be that great, but we're going to put it out there and see whether people are interested. And it happened, and we were able to generate revenue. We were able to then start to push it. The issue that obviously you have when you release something that is MVP is there are a lot of bugs, obviously, and but what that does is it means that the people that report the bugs are people who have paid for the product. And this is why I say to a lot of people that when you build a product and people buy it and it's not quite 100%, because they've bought it, they will feed back to you. And it's your opportunity to then use that feedback to improve the product. When you're giving the product away for free, people don't care whether it has bugs on it. They probably just stop using it because
Right.
they've not expended any cash to
Mhm.
acquire it. So they just stop using it. But when they pay for it, then they will respond. Then they will say, well, this isn't working. Why isn't working? I feel like I've wasted my money and so on. And what that does as a founder, as an entrepreneur, is it tests as well your business ops processes. Do you actually have a process that can manage feedback? Do you have a process that can respond to customers in a a decent amount of within a
Right.
reasonable amount of time. So these are all things that people typically overlook
Mhm.
when they build a product and release it for free.
That's a very valid point. I've never thought of that. If people are paying for it, they will, of course, demand another level of quality and they will give you more feedback. How do you decide which features to actually implement and which not to implement? Because, they are paying. Maybe a big customer suggests a feature that only fits them and doesn't fit the others. How do you define which ones you should work on or not?
That's really good. A good question, Tiago. So one of the things that we did, and I say this a lot, even on Twitter, you need to build a feedback machine, feedback loops when you build a product. Um,
Hmm.
you can do that manually, and one of the things that we did manually was to create a Slack channel. So when we built the product, we created a Slack channel, and we created a process of inviting the people who paid for the product into the Slack channel. Whenever they
Okay.
came into the Slack channel, there was a section there where they could provide feedback, and when they provided the feedback, people within the Slack channel will vote on that feedback, and based on the vote of that will determine which ones that we addressed first.
Yeah.
So
Smart.
from that perspective, it's very very clear what what it is that people want, because one, they've paid for it, and two, they've also voted on the issues that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
that they're struggling with.
Isn't it problematic to have all of your customers in one single Slack channel? Because they might even be competitors, right?
Yeah, they might be competitors, but they typically wouldn't have discussions about each other's businesses. And I guess if they do, then there's not very. I mean, they could easily do that on Twitter as well, right?
Hmm.
Um, I think we're just providing a medium for them to be able to voice their frustrations on the product.
Right.
Um, what's interesting though is it's not a scalable process, and you know initially you'd get people who are providing feedback, but after a while that dies down,
Hmm.
and that's either because you've addressed a lot of the issues,
Right.
but then you need to have there aren't there there are some customers who will not want to go onto Slack, so you need to get to them via video call. you need to get
Right.
to them via a form or something. So, but majority of them are available on Slack, and we use that quite a bit. But
It's
yeah.
a very interesting approach. Yeah, I've never thought of that, to bring all of your clients into Slack. But yeah, it makes total sense. And now that I think about it, yeah, there's many other companies and products that do that. For instance, Buy Me a Coffee, they have a Discord channel where people can just go there and yes, give feedback, and they end up creating a little community, which is also a plus. So you built this product. Did you all of the members? So I guess you said three members that's built it.
Yeah,
Or
so we had front end developer, full stack developer, and we had
right?
DevOps guys that were helping us with some DevOps as well.
Are they co-founders or did you hire them?
I hired them. I typically like to hire people to come on
Okay.
board.
So how much would that cost? Because that's already to do so as a bootstrapper, you really need to have some money on the side, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, you need to have some savings. You need to have some money, but more importantly, you need the people. You need the people who have the skills in order to be able to allow you to actually work on the business rather than in the business, because there's a subtlety there,
Hmm.
and you can get really drawn into writing code, and not being able to have your head up and actually see how am I going to take this product to market. What are my distribution channels?
Right.
Who are the people that I need to be engaging with to form partnerships or whatever it is that
Hmm.
you need to do? But yeah, you need some money. And then again, bootstrapping you can do in multiple ways, right? You could hire some people to help you with some parts of it that you think will allow you or give you the freedom to be able to work on the other parts. And getting these people on board really has helped me to be able to focus on the marketing side and just get to
Hmm.
understand a little bit better in terms of marketing.
Right. Were they full-time employees?
No, no, they were all fractional guys who came on and did a couple of hours,
Okay.
a couple of hours a week. So, um, and yeah, I mean, you have to be clever in terms of your budget. And this is what I was mentioning
Yeah.
before, that you just need to understand how to manage a budget, and you need to understand how to motivate people as well to keep
Yeah.
them interested.
And also how to organize this, right? Because in my side, I didn't have the money to hire other people, but I guess there's other bootstrappers they do. So how do you organize this? How do you do you have regular meetings where every freelancer is present? You like stand-ups or something, or are you like the bridge that connects each member and says, okay, you should do this because person A is doing that? Like, how do you organize the process?
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of what I do, as I say, it's being the link between everybody, making sure that I know what's happening, what needs to be done, why it needs to be done. Um, it was interesting because also a lot of the conversations typically happened on Slack. No,
Okay.
we rarely sort of had team meetings where we get on calls and so on. So a lot of the conversations that we had happened on Slack, and we managed everything on Slack. But interestingly, as you mentioned, that we're adopting a slightly different approach now, and my dream is hopefully coming true, where we actually have a completely distributed team, where I have somebody working in Boston, I have somebody else working in Germany,
Hmm.
and I have another person working in Ukraine. So, in order to make that all work, there is a need to have an agile board and be able to create the tasks that are necessary in order to move the business forward and keep people
Hmm.
aligned. Now that we've done that, we're just moving to that process now. That we've introduced, a new communication strategy, which involves team meetings and one-to-ones and so on. So we're kind of, it's funny to say, we're kind of growing up now a little bit,
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. So, but okay, but when you built Prelo, right? Like when you had the first idea and you said, okay, let's take three weeks to shift it a little bit. How was this process? Like, how did you distribute the tasks? Did you have like one meeting with everyone?
It was
How did you?
daily. It was daily. We were changing things every, very very frequently. It was a conversation. You've got to remember they also came through the recruitment tech business.
Right. So you already
So
know each other, kind of thing.
exactly. So they had a good understanding of how each other worked, and also the skill set that they had were complementary. So when somebody was purely on the front end, somebody else was purely on the back end, and I was purely on the design side of things, right? So
Mhm.
I would put together all of the user journeys, the workflows, and how things should be, and so on. And we would just continually just work, and we did many many hours. So I think for those 3 weeks we everybody was, I'd say pretty much full time for 3 weeks to get the
Right.
product done.
Got it. So you got the product done, and you already had a couple of potential clients,
Hmm.
right? So I guess did they join immediately and they said, okay, let's try it out, and they start paying, or was it
Yeah,
hard
I
to
mean
get
they
them to
joined
pay?
straight away. I mean, yeah, absolutely. They joined straight away once we finished the beta, we got them to test, and then we launched the MVP, and they
Mhm.
joined and became paying customers.
Is it a
Um,
subscription model too?
it's a subscription model, but what we actually did, which was interesting, and I don't mention this too much, is we use lifetime deals in order to generate initial
Mm.
revenue, and and you've got to be clever when you're playing with lifetime deals, because you need to do some analysis, and I've tweeted about this a lot in terms of understanding what the churn rate is with your industry, and also understanding what are the chances that what's the lifespan of a particular customer that comes onto your platform, and therefore charge accordingly, that a price that represents what that lifespan is based on your original monthly subscription,
Mhm.
so that you don't get into a situation where you are undercharging for your product and not making any profit. So that was a good way for us to identify who was really interested in the product, because it was almost as if they were paying, sort of 6 months in advance, or 6 months
Mhm.
upfront,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Based
Definitely.
on the attrition rate, or rather the churn rate, of any similar type of product in that industry. And we use that model to essentially then create a price for the lifetime deal, which then allowed us to get people on it. It also allowed us to test the messaging, right? Allowed us to test the messaging, allowed us to test the business ops.
Right,
How would
right.
people use the product? How
Yeah.
would they feedback? We basically had people feeding back on an MVP and helping us improve the product,
Mhm.
having paid for a lifetime
Yeah.
deal. That
And
lifetime
it
deal is not going to be forever. It's not forever, but it was something that we used to
right.
accelerate features
Yeah, no,
and,
that's very
and value.
very smart, and it allowed you, as you said, to build the product, iterate over it with people that already were invested on it. So that's really really smart. And how do you get new customers? Is it easy once you have already some on board? Do they like just talk with each other and it's more organic, or do you have to do some extra marketing to get some other clients to join?
Yeah, so I mean, with clients joining, a lot of clients have come from Twitter,
Hmm.
and some from Facebook groups as well. But what I've found is, when I tweet, my people, sometimes it does well, goes viral, and so on, and we get customers coming via that route. Also, there's some
They
Facebook.
check your profile and then they
Yes,
they find your product, or do you
correct.
tweet and advertise your product in your
No,
tweets?
I never ever advertise my product ever.
Okay.
It's just not for me, because I'm not a salesperson. It just doesn't feel authentic to me
Okay.
to go out there and say, "Hey, we've got this lead generation tool. Why don't you use it?" Blah blah blah. It just doesn't sound. It's just not me. So for me, and I say this to a lot of founders, is more people are more interested in your founder journey. People are more interested in your story.
Right.
and people connect more with your story. People will remember the fact that you said, "Oh, I had a co-founder who ran away with your money
Yeah.
before you started your this business," and they think, "Oh, wow, yeah, that's interesting." And they'll connect more with that than me saying, "Hey, go and try this lead generation platform because it's the best." That's not.
Mhm.
So yeah, so from me just sharing my story, sharing my journey over the last 6 months, I think has been really a good way to connect with
Yeah,
people
definitely.
authentically, and created friends actually that I've met on Twitter, for example. It's been really good. Whereas the first platform or second platform we didn't really use social media and we didn't really engage with people in the same way that I'm doing now. And it
Right.
felt I write about it on Twitter as well. I felt a little bit isolated, actually.
Yeah, definitely. I definitely agree, and I totally understand. I felt the same, and I think Twitter in that sense is really good. You get to meet a lot of people doing similar stuff and in a similar journey, and you don't feel so alone for sure.
Mm.
So walk me down the numbers now. Are you profitable already? Are you
No,
making
not
money?
quite profitable yet. I mean, the first month we did, I think just over $500. Second month we
Mhm.
did just under $2,000. Third month
Wow.
we did just over $2,000. Fourth month, I think fourth month is January. We've gone down a little bit in January, right? Just I
Mhm.
think about 1,500 in January. But Januaries are typically slow, and also we had to pull back on the marketing quite a bit because I'm basically in a transition phase at the moment. My lead developer is moving on. You probably saw my tweet
Oh yeah, I
yesterday
did.
and like
Yeah.
last week. Yeah.
Hmm.
So my lead developer is moving on. And over the last, I'd say even the last 2 months or so, he's been sort of less and less available.
Me
So
too.
I've just
Yeah.
got a new team onboarded now, and we're just bedding in, which was what I was mentioning to you before. We've got somebody in the Ukraine, somebody
Right.
in Germany, another person in Boston. So we're just about to start pressing the gas from this month, February.
Right.
A lot of activity is going to be done on outbound marketing now because we've never done any outbound marketing up until now.
Hmm.
So yeah, so that's going to be interesting.
What's your MRR goal for 2022?
MRR go for 2022. If we can get to 7K
Hmm.
MRR by December, that'll be absolutely amazing. I think for me, it's just really trying to work on the necessary distribution channels for us to be able to get to that goal.
Hmm. Are you confident you'll get there?
Oh yeah, we'll get there. We'll get there. We just need to make the right, we just need to make the right decisions and yeah, just keep pushing forward.
What keeps you up at night? What makes you, wake up and think, okay, damn, maybe I should go back to investing banking, or does those thoughts come to you, or
Um,
never?
no, not anymore. The investment banking world I've kind of left behind now. But what does keep me up at night though is trying to find a template, a blueprint for the marketing strategy that is
Mm.
repeatable. That's what's keeping me up at night. Because I think once we find that, then everything is just formulaic, right? It's just a formula then. Because then you can say, if I spend 7 hours on marketing this week, we will get X amount of money in return. Does that make sense?
Right, right, yes.
That is what's keeping me up at night. And once we're able to identify what that is, we can just step on that gas and say, okay, it's just now a process of scaling. So, in short, if somebody was to ask this, the answer would be finding product market fit. I think
Mm.
is what keeps me up at night.
But I mean, don't you think you already have, because you already have happy customers, right?
Yes, but it's I think it's more. I think product market fit is a little bit more because I think product market fit would demonstrate that you're growing at something like 20-30% month to month. That for me is product market fit.
Isn't that more branding? that I don't know, because I totally see what you're saying and totally understand. Because, for instance, in your case, it seemed that you were growing, and then in January it kind of went down a little bit, and it's always frustrating, right? Because you have clients, you have people that are happy with it, you have people that are paying for it,
Hmm.
but you don't see it grow every month, right?
Correct.
Like 30%, 40%, whatever. And one would expect that if there's people enjoying it, why isn't it growing, right? I mean, and it's the same for my projects. I see people using it and I think, okay, I mean, people enjoy it, it's because it's good. And then I think it's either it's not good enough that a lot of people want to use it, or it's the marketing, or it's the market and there's a lot of products. So I don't know, in this sense, how to scale, how to take it to the next, kind of hockey stick growth is where I struggle the most.
Yeah, so for me, I think it's very simple because we haven't done any outbound marketing. Everything has been inbound, and we know exactly the channels that we've used. I think when you start to do outbound marketing, fingers crossed, you will start to see a massive difference in the amount of growth that's coming in. Um, and then you can be in a position to scale to then say, okay, we've done, I don't know, 10 hours of outbound marketing this month, and it's increased our growth by X. you know
Mhm.
that then you can multiply and say, okay, now I need somebody to come in and do outbound
Right.
marketing full time. Then that is when you start to see scale, right? Because now you have a
Yeah.
formula that you can replicate. So for
But I,
me, I have a formula for inbound marketing, but I can't. I don't want to scale. I don't need to scale it just yet. I need to
Mhm.
just focus on trying to find a formula for outbound marketing because personally, I think the outbound marketing is perhaps not perhaps is definitely one that is in the short term going to generate the most impact.
Right. So what is the difference between inbound and outbound marketing?
So from a sort of rudimentary my rudimentary knowledge of this, so outbound marketing is typically you sending out information or something to a group, a list, or a an audience with a particular call to action.
Hmm.
So you're saying an email to a list to say, hey, we've built this new platform that's going to be amazing for you. We think that it will save you X. Click below to join the platform.
Hmm.
You're. Whereas inbound marketing is a little bit different. You're just subliminally putting information out there, like you're writing a blog, for example, and writing a blog about, how can you optimize your lead generation funnel? Or how can you find key decision makers in startups? What are the key things that you would look for in a
Hmm.
startup that's generating revenue? And putting those types of blogs out there, waiting for Google to index them
Right.
and
Right. Yeah.
appearing on a Google search. That's an inbound strategy,
Right.
which basically then means that people are coming to you without you having to
The passive
directly.
passive
Exactly.
user client
Ex-
acquisition kind of thing.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you are trying now to get the formula for inbound or outbound?
Outbound at the moment.
Okay. And what
Outbound.
are you doing to get to this formula? What experiments are you doing?
We're going to be experimenting with reach on places like LinkedIn.
Hmm.
Sort of sending out email, well, in mails, I think is what they call it on LinkedIn, where you
Hmm.
just send a message to people who you think
Right.
are in your demographic, where you sort of say, hey, we've built Prelo. We think you, as a founder looking for collaboration with other funded startups, could
Hmm.
make use of this. So that type of outbound outreach is certainly something that we're going to be experimenting with starting
Okay.
from this month.
Hmm. And it's a lot of experimenting. That's something that I also found here in this bootstrapping journey. I mean, there's no one size fits all solution. Every founder needs to experiment until they find what works for them. So I wish you all the best with your experiments, Olu, and I hope to, and we'll definitely, the wannabe entrepreneurs will definitely follow your journey. building Prelo, trying to find product market fit. And as a last question for you, let's say that there's one bootstrapper starting now, having an idea. What would be your one advice for them to start? The things that you've done and you realize, okay, I should have done it that way instead. What is that? What is this advice?
Uh, a couple of advice, really.
Right.
One, if you have an idea, go on to Google Trends and find out, how are people searching for this type of for this idea that you have.
Mm-hmm.
What does that look like from a trend perspective? The other is to look at, are there any competitors in this field? Where are they? Who are their customers? And how competitive is that industry? There are various tools that you can use to do this quick analysis.
Mm-hmm.
So I maintain to people 10% idea, 90% investigation, and trying to
Totally.
find customers.
Right. Do a little market research. Yeah, I think that's really smart and it's a great tip. Olu, thank you so much for your time. It was a pleasure to get to know you and to get to know your story. And I'm sure that we had a lot to talk about as well. Maybe in the next session we can speak more about what happened with with your co-founder. I think that that's probably an interesting story. But until then, I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks very much, Tiago. Really appreciate you having me, and look forward to being invited again.
Yeah, for sure. And I will link Prelo and Olu's Twitter profile in the show notes so that the listeners can go and check it out. And yeah, this was another interview. If you like this kind of interviews, if you like to know more about stories of other bootstrappers, other entrepreneurs, go to wannabe-entrepreneur.com. And I have interviewed a lot of entrepreneurs already with fabulous stories that you can, and I've learned a lot from them as well. So make sure to check that out. This was another Wannabe Entrepreneur. See you next time.